It's Thursday, January 23rd. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball. Conference championship games await us. We have a lot of coaching news in the air right now. Football is as alive as ever. And joining me to talk a little ball after a nice little vacation, nice little break, it is the one and only Dalton Del Don. Dalton, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, Harmon. It's been too long since we talked ball. Looking forward to it. It's been a couple weeks, and we have some important games to go over. So looking forward to it, man. Like I said, I missed you.
I missed you too. We have a ton of big, like I said, we have a ton of big stuff to talk about, including those two big games to hit on. We are going to get to the NFC and AFC championship game in that order. However, first, we have a lot of coaching news that has happened that we have not discussed on this podcast yet. And we will, for the listeners' sake, we're going to have a big, full, fat coaching podcast, like full reactions at some point, probably in February. Last year we did it mid-February with Ben Solak. There's a couple of Cliff Kingsbury takes I want erased from the internet on that particular show, which I'll probably flog myself for again in this episode. However, we're going to do that once all the head coaches and the offensive coordinator spots are filled. But we do have a few that I want to discuss here, and we're going to frame this, Dalton, pretty much just the winners from these moves that have happened so far that are official, that affect some pretty critical teams here. So we're going to stay positive. We're just going to talk winners. Let's first hit on Mike Vrabel to the New England Patriots with Josh McDaniels. What's old is new again, once more in New England, back as the offensive coordinator. Dalton, I imagine you're pretty high on Drake May. I'm pretty high on Drake May. Do we think that Drake May is a winner from this particular move?
I don't have a super strong take on this first one. Vrabel should bring in the winning culture, but he does rely on his coordinators. McDaniels, seemingly a poor head coach, but successful coordinator. But was that due to his situation as well? So I don't have a big take here. I hope it's a winning move for Drake May, whom I love as a player, and for fantasy he runs and the arrows pointing up, get him some more weapons. But this to me is, I don't know, kind of a wait and see type move. If you're a Patriots fan, you're certainly cool with it. I mean, Vrabel has a great track record, but there's some open questions still.
Yeah, the way I look at it is that I do think if I was a Patriots fan, my reaction to this would be, it's fine. Like you could definitely do worse than you could definitely do worse than Josh McDaniels as your offensive coordinator. I would have loved to get some new ideas in the building. You know, I think the Patriots are a little. It's fun. It's just funny, Dalton, that they fire Bill Belichick. Because they want to get away from the coach-centric model, you know, one guy running the entire organization. Well, they hire Mike Vrabel, who is going to run that building that way through Mike Vrabel. You know, he's already brought in some of his guys into the front office, things like that. And they're right back to the offense coordinator that they had under Bill Belichick. It feels like, it's like, oh, we tried something new for a year, didn't work out. We're just going to go back to what we knew before. That is a little bit like, you know, it's not too dissimilar to some of the feelings that I had about the Saints before they hired Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator. Like, let's get some new offensive ideas into the building for the first time in like multiple decades. There's a little bit of me that thinks that here with McDaniels, but at the same time, the fact that we saw him put together a pretty good, like, design quarterback run game with Cam Newton in the 2020, you know, random COVID season that they have, I think that could be good for Drake May. And I think people still don't give McDaniels enough credit for how much of a burden he took on during Mac Jones's rookie season and how much he was a part of Mac Jones being successful early on. And as soon as he's out of there, Mac Jones obviously completely regresses. He's currently he's going to be a free agent, but he was a Jaguars backup quarterback. So I think McDaniels can be good for Drake May. And, you know, you mentioned it. He's not a good head coach, and he is almost certainly never going to get another one of those jobs again.
Yeah, producer Colin brings up that Stevenson, a sneaky winner. Maybe they're going to run the football, but the key here is how the development of Drake May. And good point about Mac Jones, and hopefully he can do the same, if not even more, for Drake May, who's the obvious future of the franchise and could be a top 12 fantasy QB as soon as next year, given that rushing ability. So, yeah, sneakily optimistic. I'm good with that, but it's still some questions. Do you know that I heard the stat that can you name the only quarterback, Denver quarterback drafted by the Broncos to win a Super Bowl?
The only quarterback drafted by the Broncos to win as a starter?
Sorry, to win a playoff game.
Oh, I'm Tim Tebow.
That's right. Right. So that was McDaniels, right? Yeah, good. Yeah,
drafted,
that's right. So,
drafted by Josh McDaniels. I don't think McDaniels wasn't the coach when Tebow won. Yeah, it was John Fox, right? When
he
Tebow
had drafted him, though, right? He did draft him, though,
yes,
right?
he did draft him, which
okay.
seems just insane in hindsight, because even what. But again, maybe McDaniels has some, desire to be like a quarterback run game guy. It's just every other quarterback that McDaniels has been with, and it's like Tebow's just such a weird thing in general, but it just seems bizarre that was like his pick.
Totally bizarre. But I don't know I don't have a strong take on the Patriots one, but like I said.
Yeah, no, I think this is good though. Like I think overall it's fine for Drake May. It's probably a positive. I do think McDaniels is a good offensive coach. You just got to keep him away from the head coaching spot here. Right. He can probably build a good dynamic with Drake, and I think it's just about the players getting in here. You got to get better players, obviously, but I do think Drake May will be a pretty good. He'll be a pretty good quarterback sleeper, obviously, across the board next season. Let's go to the next one here, which is Ben Johnson, hired by the Chicago Bears to be their head coach. Reportedly, he's going to bring Dennis Allen in as the defensive coordinator, which I think is pretty. I like that a lot. If that actually ends up, I don't know if it's official yet or if it's been, pen has been put to paper, but I do think Dennis Allen there is a good resource for Ben Johnson. Even if Dennis Allen wasn't a good head coach, he is a great defensive mind and a great defensive coordinator. That's a nice hire for him. But yeah, Ben Johnson to the Chicago Bears. Winners on the offensive side of the ball in the wake of this move.
Obviously, Caleb Williams, Bears, huge winners in this whole thing. And I was a little scared in some of the other, coaches they brought in interviews, but they come out the clear winner here. Ben Johnson, the offensive mind everyone wanted to bring in. Caleb Williams, obviously, he wanted an offensive coach, and that was important. And obviously, it makes sense given that he's the future of their franchise. Sneakily, Rome Odunze, if you look at what Ben Johnson's quotes on like the slot, and we're hoping that's where he moves to. Last year, Odunze is one of only 6 receivers, had more than 20% of their targets strictly from go routes. So Odunze here is like absolutely could be the big winner. Everyone's going to say Caleb Williams, but Odunze for fantasy purposes absolutely could help if they move him to the slot specifically. But yeah, it's all about Caleb Williams, and Ben Johnson was the offensive mind everyone wanted. And now on the flip side, big losers are the Lions.
Yeah, absolutely. Big losers are the Lions. And look, they're going to be an interesting topic when we do have the coaching conversation in that full podcast, because it's just they're going to lose a lot of assistants. I don't know if this is fake news or not, so excuse me for just saying it, but Lions fans have been like in an uproar, and some of it you just see like embarrassing tweets and stuff by certain Lions fans and things like that, just losing it about the Ben Johnson, going to Chicago news and things like that. But again, this might be fake news. I apologize if it is, but I read a headline that this is the first coordinator that the Lions have lost to a head coaching job since JFK was president. So this is uncharted territory for the Detroit Lions, where not only we're going to talk about Aaron Glenn here in a second, their assistants, their head coaches have left. A bunch of their assistants are going to get plucked over too. So they already lost their defensive line coach to the New England Patriots to be Mike Vrabel's defensive coordinator as well. So again, assistants are going to get plucked from this staff as well. But let's stick here with Ben Johnson in the Chicago Bears. I agree with you. Rome Odunze can be a big winner from this if he does become that power slot receiver for the team. I'm interested, and honestly though, Nate, Tyson, and I have gone back and forth on this. I posted a clip from Football 301 of us kind of talking through this, where he does think that Rome is a better fit as a power slot receiver. I think he can play X on the outside, but I also think that Ben Johnson, whose offenses were so good in Detroit and maximizing space and creating a lot of space underneath, probably a guy like DJ Moore, who's not as explosive as Jamison Williams necessarily, but he can really function on those, big in-breaking routes, and he can get a lot of yards after the catch. He's more of a playmaker with the ball in his hands from like a tackle breaking perspective than a Jamison Williams. But I would imagine that he probably creates more space than a guy like Rome Odunze does on those outside routes. So I think if I'm looking at those two guys specifically, I probably do see Rome maybe as the better fit to be the slot receiver. It's not as if like there's an Amon-Ra St. Brown role. He's too good to be just like put in a box that way. But again, like you said, maximizing the slot receiver position, if it is Odunze there, he's going to be somebody I want to buy everywhere in Dynasty this year and redraft, et cetera, et cetera.
For sure. And Caleb, had a lot of questionable underlying stats his rookie year. Big, hopefully, coaching upgrade can really help with that. So, it's a massive signing for the Bears franchise.
Obviously, they have to get the offensive line right. And I am very curious. We're talking about the passing game, Dalton. I think clear winners there, right? Like Caleb Williams, DJ Moore is a winner. I think Roma Dunze is a winner. These guys are all winners in the wake of this move. I am curious what to see becomes of the backfield, right? Because DeAndre Swift was with the Lions in Ben Johnson's first season there. And I mean, that was not a good fit. It didn't work out, right? And they ended up
They made a point that David Montgomery, they're like a massive upgrade, basically. They even went out of their way almost to say that. I mean, not that he's the exact same player, but they thought the Gibbs Montgomery, they even like publicly stated, was like a massive upgrade from their Swift situation.
Absolutely. I mean, from a vision perspective, like the way that Jahmyr Gibbs is able to identify those holes on the edge and just explode through them. Swift is not that type of runner. He's also useful in the screen game, but he's not a good route runner at the running back position. He doesn't make good decisions on like option routes and present a reliable target there. So, I mean, he's on a multi-year contract. I imagine he's going to be on the team, but I wouldn't rule out, probably not like a first round pick or anything like that, but I wouldn't rule out some running back being brought into the building here, especially because they've obviously had success with a multi-tandem backfield there in Detroit.
Swift looked good at times on the field this season, but boy, at the same time, he didn't look so good in hindsight when we saw what Barkley did in the same situation. Swift was just in last year, Barkley setting records, so that didn't age well for Swift. So great point about the Johnson connection with him. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I mean, offensive line, has to be the priority. You got to take some of those guys early on in the NFL draft and probably a couple of veterans in the free agent market as well. So that's obviously the big thing to look for there. Next coaching move to talk about here, Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn hired by the New York Jets to be their head coach. We don't yet have an offensive coordinator hired here. I know Aaron Glenn is said to be interested in some of the guys on the Lions staff, but Nick Caley, who's currently, I think, the passing game coordinator with the Los Angeles Rams. That's an interesting one. I know a lot of people who speak very highly of Nick Caley, and he also comes from, I love when coaches have multiple backgrounds, right? When because he's a longtime Patriots guy. He was with the Patriots for years and years and years as their tight end coach before going to LA to be with Sean McVay. Again, I've just heard really good things about him. So if that ends up being the OC hire, that'd be great. But just in terms of Aaron Glenn, I don't know if we necessarily we won't have any offensive winners here, although I will say I think Aaron Glenn's going to be huge for the culture with the New York Jets. I don't know if you've seen that clip with Aaron Glenn on the Pivot podcast, Dalton, where he talks about effort and just he says if you're not, basically they have like categories of how they grade effort and things like that, and if you don't meet all three categories, those players are labeled as traitors and they can go play for another team. And the New York Jets, I think at times, maybe some of their star players weren't always giving full effort. So I think this is going to be a pretty big culture change for the New York Jets, which was necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what is it? The ping pong table rule or whatever. If you had one, remove it. If you didn't add one, this seems like an opposite. So it seems seemingly good for the Jets franchise, but for us fantasy players, we're just waiting for the OC hire, right? So many dominoes yet to fall. Will Aaron Rodgers return? Will Devontae Adams return? Where will Garrett Wilson play if they do return? Can Breece Hall bounce back? This is just one of those wait and see, and maybe the McVay tree sounds good to me, but let's wait and see where the OC hire is.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll see where the offense coordinator hire comes from. But I mean, even if this team is just better on paper, like, and again, they might not be better from a record perspective. They might still struggle on the field, but just a better cohesive vision, I do think can be good for guys like Breece Hall and guys like Garrett Wilson, who will be on this team most likely next year. Let's go to the next one here. Liam Cohen. These two we can kind of put together here because Liam Cohen backs out of the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching interview process and signs a new contract, or at least is offered a new contract, likely to take it. There's still a part of me, and I know Jonathan Jones from CBS reported that this he wondered if it might change. Maybe it wasn't a report, but wondered if this might change in result of the second news I'm going to say here. But as of now, what we know is that Liam Cohen's going to stay in Tampa Bay as the offense coordinator, signs a new contract, gets more money, which, money talks, and staying in a job that you're good at and it's a good job, that talks too, especially when you're going to get more opportunities if you're Liam Cohen down the line to be a head coach. And in conjunction with this, when Cohen became the second hot coordinator, in addition to Ben Johnson to say no thank you to the Jacksonville Jaguars, they turn around and fire Trent Baalke, who was a big reason why these candidates were not wanting to go to Jacksonville. The Jags are a mess. We don't know what to make of them at this point, but Cohen staying in Tampa Bay, Dalton, I imagine that has to make everybody there a winner next season.
Yeah, huge news for Baker Mayfield, all the offensive players on Tampa Bay. Maybe Cohen stayed just set to take over for Bowles in a year or two. Baker Mayfield had a 7.3% TD touchdown percentage, TD rate last year. That would have led the league the last 2 years. Will finish second this year because Lamar's was 8.7, but he was due for some TD regression to begin with, but he was also a bit of a screen merchant. So like he was relying on some calls here from Liam Cohen, who returns. Mayfield's the man, don't get me wrong, even if he regresses a little in the TD department, but he'll be helped by Cohen staying, because I could have seen us just waving that off. It's like, well, he lost Canales and it was fine, totally. But oh no, we're not. That would have been, because Cohen replaced him. So keeping Cohen there, huge for Mayfield. By the way, their loss to the Washington, his age, in the playoffs, Mayfield just didn't have the ball. I mean, that was a good team, and we're seeing Washington may even make the Super Bowl. So great news for Baker Mayfield, their receivers, and Bucky Irving. I mean, he's benefited from a ton of screens and in that game, and this offense will score points. So big news for the Bucs. And then conversely, what's Jacksonville doing? Waiting so long to fire Balky. John Oning, he's a PFF editor, a brother-in-law of a close friend of mine. I'm actually eating dinner with him Saturday night. He just tweeted out that he sent player scouting reports to every team back in the day, and Balky was one of 2 GM types to actually personally respond to him. So he's actually like a nice dude, I guess. Yeah. And certainly we knew he was a nice dude to owners. He's very good at
very nice.
Cultivating a relationship to owners. But apparently he is a good dude outside as well. But man, I know as a Niner guy, I'm well aware of Balky. And yeah, the criticism here is why Shaw didn't get rid of him right after the season, and now they're left with the leftovers of the coaching hires. But yeah, Balky, like I said, nice guy, but I can understand why he was let go.
Yeah, again, clearly owners like him. And yeah, I think it's not even that Balky is a disaster as a general manager. I think he wasn't good enough to keep the job as long as he did, especially under some of the circumstances and things like that. And obviously because he was a bit of a toxic figure, like he's not, I don't know, he's not Howie Roseman or something. He's not like the best GM in football or anything, but he still is a pretty decent talent evaluator, but he takes big risks on injured players back in San Francisco. You are familiar with that, to the point that it's talent over everything. And in terms of roster building, I think he struggled there, where Nate's been big on this for a while, where he gets these like guys that are just too similar. And it's like, okay, Parker Washington, we draft him. Well, he's never getting on the field unless Christian Kirk gets hurt. Or Gabe Davis is kind of like too redundant. Things like that, right? The team building together didn't make sense. So it's strange to hold him in this job. Not that he's like probably not a bad talent evaluator or anything like that, but the reality is that he's way too, Nate's compared him to Littlefinger. I compared him to Grima Wormtongue on like another podcast recently, where he's just whispering in King Theoden's ear. Like that is not, like, as a coach, you don't want that, especially as a guy in Balky who is very involved, like wants to be very involved in the coaching process of it too. So yeah, you just have to get rid of this guy. And it does make me a little nervous that for guys like Trevor Lawrence and guys like Brian Thomas Jr., that now they're going to get spurned by these offensive guys. Like maybe they can hire Joe Brady. If I was them, I would turn around and hire Joe Brady, but makes you a little nervous for, year 2 of Brian Thomas and Trevor Lawrence, that, maybe they don't end up attracting a great offensive mind to this job.
You make me sad. I didn't think of BTJ. Yeah, you're right. We need, if for no other reason than him. Yeah, we need to get an offensive coordinator there for sure. But yeah, that's a situation that remains in flux. And just from the guy out there, Robert Saleh, it sounds like, because a second interview, and as the Niners are just waiting for him. They're going to make him the highest paid coordinator. They need him a defense coordinator, and their plan B is like Staley. In-house. It's ugly,
they might get screwed on this. They might really.
The Niners are, and Niner fans are like, oh, at least one. We get a last place schedule next year. Another thing is we won't miss out on these interviews. We're out. The season's over early, so they can get the interview. The job process not going to help. Saleh's looked like he's going to be head coach at Jacksonville, and the Niners have a second or third choice defensive coordinator, but the funny thing at Saleh, a guy, have you ever heard of a guy fired mid-season and be this hot of a commodity that firing year? No, his stock went way up by just simply leaving the Jets organization. Yeah. Pretty funny.
And what happened to them after he left?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I mean, he's fired in mid-season, and then he's like interview after interviews 3 months later. Pretty funny.
And I'm kind of mixed on Saleh as a coach. I think there were real, not as a defensive coach. Defensive coach, I think he'd be awesome with the Niners as a defensive coordinator. But just in terms of him as a head coach, it's another kind of like I'd react to the McDaniels thing. It's fine if Jacksonville ends up on Saleh. It's probably fine. But I think that they could have shot higher, and I don't know who Saleh would bring in as his offensive coordinator. I actually think if he brought back Mike LaFleur, who was his OC with the Jets, I think that could actually be good news because I think Mike LaFleur had some pretty good ideas and got to call the plays in Week 18 for the Rams and showed pretty well in doing that. It could end up working out for Jacksonville, but we'll obviously talk about them when we do the full coaching pod. Just on Tampa Bay real quick before we move on. Again, this really can't be overstated. You're so right to bring up the fact that, Mayfield has all these touchdown passes, and I'm not saying this to take anything away from Mayfield, but the screen game and the passing game designs were so good in Tampa Bay, and now they can just build on that. And that's what makes me excited about Tampa Bay next season, Dalton, is that you look at their roster. They're young in the backfield. They can probably get better in the running back room. The offensive line, other than Tristan Wirfs and Ben Bredesen, who they're probably going to lose in free agency, I would guess. But like Graham Barton's young, Cody Mock is young, Luke Gadecki can still be improving. Like they can still be going up there after transforming the offensive line last year. And tight end Cade Otton is set. Really, their only outstanding question is: are we bringing Chris Godwin back, or are we letting him walk in free agency coming off an injury? This is an offense that's set, and I think could be. I actually don't think these guys, other than Bucky Irving, probably will get super pricey in fantasy drafts. I could see this being one of the better offensive situations to attack next season.
Yeah, McMillan obviously came on down the stretch, even if his TDs were a bit unsustainable. But yeah, looking at early ranks and whatnot, Evans continues to get disrespected, just 1,000 yards again. But Bucky Irving will be people will be fighting each other to draft him, and rightfully so.
Any other final thoughts on any of these coaching news or any of the other openings? I know producer Colin. I've censored producer Colin about any Cowboys head coaching search talk in our private lives. He at least wants me to mention that the Brian Schottenheimer thing could be at the finish line. We'll see. Maybe by the time you're hearing this, that's already happened. Again, I'm not talking about the damn Cowboys head coaching search until something actually happens. So Dalton, if you have something other than Cowboys to give a thought on here, final thoughts before we move on to the next segment.
Still mildly curious to see if Deion Sanders' name emerges, and it is mildly interesting also that Tom Brady's not just getting his way immediately, getting all the hires he wanted. He's struggling a little in his new role. Although at the same time, I'm kind of rooting for the Raiders at this point. Just so many bad things are happening to them. So. Just a lot more dominoes to fall in place, and hopefully Saleh turns down the Jacksonville job and rejoins the Niners for 1 year, defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be good for you. I am curious to see what happens with the Saints. Their team that I do have my eye on here. I think they really wanted to talk to Aaron Glenn, but I think Glenn kind of was always maybe angling for the New York Jets. They might end up on like a Mike McCarthy type, but we shall see what happens there. All right, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to preview the NFC Championship game right after this.
Introducing Daily Draw, the latest free-to-play game from Yahoo Sports. Daily Draw gives you a pack of 6 prediction cards every day based on the day's biggest sporting event. Download or update the Yahoo Sports app on the Apple App Store or Google Play and join the action with Daily Draw today.
All right, we're back. NFC Championship game. It's time. Let's talk about it. Washington Commanders at Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles are 6-point home favorites. Got a 47.5 point total on this one. Dalton Del Don. Let's talk Commanders when they have the ball. Dalton, as the foremost Jaden Daniels fan that I know, the biggest one of the biggest at least. Pretty exciting to see this guy playing an NFC Championship game. And I don't know, what do we think about when they have the ball in this game?
Dude, Jaden Daniels, I liked him in fantasy this year, but I was like skeptical of his pressure to sack ratio. I'm like questioning them taking him over Drake May. At this point, I mean, here's the people you're starting an NFL franchise. It's Mahomes, Lamar, Josh Allen, Burrow, or Daniels, and that's it. I mean, there's no other discussion. I mean, that's not even close. I mean, and Daniels gets the nod over some of the others because they're older. I mean, this VR stuff is really interesting. Have you seen the, apparently, I mean, I don't know how old that news of. Have you seen the VR, how he visualizes everything, and he demanded that Washington have this system, demanded whatever team he was drafted with and uses 1.75 speed. It was news to me, and I told my wife, she's like, oh, that's old news. Pardon me, Carly, but apparently that had been old news to her. But news to me that all this stuff, and it's really interesting, and the guy is amazing. They don't punt. They don't punt or turn the ball over. I mean, he's making these crazy good throws. I'm more confident than I was after Stroud's awesome rookie year, and I know 1 year later we're like kind of more down on him, and I could see saying the same Daniels, but I don't see saying the same Daniels, I should say. I'm so impressed. He's awesome. He's so good, man. I just don't know what else to say other than Jaden Daniels is amazing. He's going to be the third fantasy QB off the board next year, and he's a top 5 real life player already.
The Commanders are only the 4th team in the common draft era to make a top 2 pick and be in the conference championship the following season. Strangely, they're also the only one of those 4 teams to take a quarterback and do it. I don't know who the other teams are. I just saw that stat, so that's really interesting. And I mean, he's such a culture changer here, man. I mean, it is unbelievable. Like, I always credit Sigmund Bloom for saying this, like, teams take on the personality of their head coach and quarterback, and this team just exudes Jaden Daniels' personality, which is unflappable, high degree of confidence. Dan Quinn obviously deserves a lot of credit here, and so does Cliff Kingsbury, who, like I said, I was so skeptical of the Kingsbury hire. And, I think a lot of people were, based on how things have ended in Arizona. I think the way things are going in Arizona right now versus how they're going in Washington, maybe the Cliff was a Kyler Cliff, Dalton. We've talked about that, how Cliff's teams fell off in the second half of the season. Maybe that was more of a Kyler Murray thing. Maybe it was more, it's just coincidence, whatever. But I think Cliff's done an outstanding job here, and particularly last week against the Detroit Lions. Man, that was so it's so impressive. Consistently beating the blitz, had answers all over the place for Jaden Daniels. And that's kind of where I want to start talking about this matchup here, because Jaden Daniels has obviously been just lights out against the blitz this year. Per Next Gen Stats, the Eagles blitzed Jaden Daniels on just 5 of his 11 dropbacks in their first meeting in Week 11, his lowest blitz rate faced in a game so far in his career. However, in their second matchup, the Eagles dialed up the heat, sending their second highest blitz rate, 35.6% in a game this season. If I'm Vic Fangio, looking at the results of those 2 games, seeing what Jaden Daniels has done over the course of his season, especially in the postseason against the blitz, I'm not trying to send a lot of extra heat at Jaden Daniels, which is fine because the Eagles overall are not a very high blitz team, especially because I do think if the Eagles are going to dominate this game on defense, which you could you could sell me either way, Dalton. I don't know how you view it. Jalen Carter, who's he's going to win himself a Defensive Player of the Year at some point. He's so good. He was dominant in the first game against Washington, and he's going to go against them this week without Sam Cosmi, who's been a really good offensive lineman for them. I think Trent Scott might take over that spot. So Jalen Carter, definitely a big player to watch in this game.
And it was so obvious when he was falling in the draft a couple years ago. It was ridiculous. The Eagles needed to replace. Why did he fall to 11th? I don't understand. There was off-field issues or something.
Yeah,
I don't even follow college, and it was at the time it was screaming obvious, and it's very frustrating. The Eagles unit. First of all, I'd say I will take the points here, and I think the Commanders are live. That's before even Hurts' status. But that said, the Eagles defense is arguably the best unit on the field here Sunday. They're really legit, and I'd be shocked if Washington's going to be able to run the ball with any success with Brian Robinson or Eckler. So this is going to all fall on Jaden Daniels. His over-under for rushing yards, I think, was like 54.5. So the number's high, and it's a good defense. So that just sounds about right. But I think, he's up for the task, and even if McLaurin's guarded a little bit better than he has in the past couple weeks, maybe Brown remains involved, but this game's definitely going to fall on Daniels' shoulders against a awesome defense, if not the best defense in the NFL. So it's a very, very tough task, especially with his offensive line now banged up.
It's interesting you say that the Eagles defense is the best unit in this matchup, and I think I agree with you. Would you rank it Eagles defense, Commanders offense?
Yes.
Eagles offense, Commanders defense?
I think the last, barring, yes, I would, but I think the final two are closer than you think because Washington's defense is playing far better, and I don't know the status of Hurts at all. I just don't. Maybe the line suggests he's fine because it opened at 4.5 and it jumped to 6, but the cryptic talking and his he couldn't really move afterward. I don't know. I just feel like he's not going to be 100%. That said, maybe Tanner McKee, who has like a 80% TD rate, can just come in and be just fine. But I think absolutely yes. Eagles best with defense, and then next Washington offense, and then a tier.
Yeah, Commanders 4th in EPA per play on offense over the course of the season. Eagles were 6th in terms of offensive success rate. It's actually an even bigger gap. Washington was 5th. Philadelphia was 13th. So that and a lot of that, obviously, there's a huge gap between the Eagles run game and the Eagles pass game, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I think that the Commanders offense is firmly in the circle of trust. Passing game wise, it's going to be really interesting. Quinyon Mitchell is I would guess he probably plays in this game, but he's not going to be 100%, which is a big deal because obviously he locked down Terry McLaurin in the first matchup where they just kind of left Terry on that one side of the field. They've certainly done a better job of moving McLaurin around. They've gotten him like some slot reps. They've gotten him he had a great slot fade I think the next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's had some plays on that right offensive right side as well. So that's definitely is going to move around a bit more than he did in that first matchup. And obviously in the second matchup, McLaurin had that long touchdown with Quinyon Mitchell kind of in like a pattern match coverage on the outside. So I think that injury is obviously a big one because like if McLaurin doesn't have a big game, they don't win like in the playoffs period, I think. Even though De'Ami Brown, like what a strange emergence that De'Ami Brown has had here. And like in fairness, the like long catch on the big post route crossing route, whatever you want to call it, against the Detroit Lions last week. I mean, Jaden Daniels couldn't have put that more accurate. Like that's one of those ones where he just could have walked it down the field and dropped it into De'Ami Brown's hands. That's how accurate it was. But Brown still deserves credit for emerging in this offense, and having a second pitch there probably helps them a little bit in this game. I still think the Eagles defense is good enough to dominate, and like they just need to have a couple of big plays here because I do think the other side of the ball, the Eagles have some matchup advantages on that Commanders defense. But yeah, to me, Jalen Carter, like some of these edge rushers who have emerged here, Nolan Smith has played a little bit better, but you know, there's still smaller guys like that are pure edge rushers. I could see this being a big Jaden Daniels scrambling game once again here, Dalton.
And Zacchaeus is banged up. Eckler is going to have to be involved in this passing game. And if Mitchell does play and shut down McLaurin, Brown is going to have to be involved yet again in this game because Washington 6-point dogs. I just think the volume is going to be there as far from a passing attack. And yeah, if you wanted the over on Daniels' rushing for 54.5 yards, I would be fine with it because I think he's going to be heavily involved in that area in this game. He just has to be.
Even 10.5. I think the 10.5 carries actually at minus 120 might be the better bet because
might even be better. Yeah,
I think that's probably the better bet. What do we make of the ground game in Washington? Because the Commanders ranked 18th from weeks 14 on in rushing success rate on just pure running back runs. So removing Jaden Daniels from the equation here. So week 14 on to the end of the regular season. Right now in the playoffs, they sit at about 40% rushing success rate. Just 29.5% of their runs have gone for 5+ yards. Every other team under 30% has been eliminated. Like this has not been a good ground when just handing the ball to the running backs. And now they have an offensive line injury. You know, Eckler's still making plays as a receiver. I think he probably is going to have to make plays as a receiver in this game as well. But like the Brian Robinson run game had some moments, I guess, last week, but still overall, it's not been a successful down to down rushing offense.
Yeah, it just reveals how much responsibility is on Daniels' shoulders and how impressive it is. His offense is still moving and not punting with not getting as much help from the ground game. I think you might have even said this stat I heard earlier this week on a pod that among all the rookie quarterbacks to start conference championship games, they've all had top 3 defenses. And the Commanders were like 18th in scoring or something like this year, although definitely playing better now. But yeah, he's overcoming a mediocre defense and no running game, and we love McLaurin, but that's it after McLaurin. Yeah. I mean, dude's balling, man. It's so impressive, Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, the stat was from an NFL researcher where the rookie quarterbacks to start a conference championship game, Brock Purdy, number 1 scoring defense that year, with the 49ers, Mark Sanchez, number 1 scoring defense. Joe Flacco, number 3 scoring defense. Ben Roethlisberger, number 1 scoring defense. Sean King with the Bucks, number 3 scoring defense. And yeah, Jaden Daniels is 18th with the Commanders. And that defense has definitely played better.
Definitely,
There's no question about that. Like this is a unit that's better on that side of the field. But if this is an offense first team with a quarterback who, I said this, God, I can't remember what game it was now, but it might have been the Falcons game when I did the solo recap on the Sunday night show. This system, and I'm not taking anything away from Cliff Kingsbury when I say this, because I think he's done a great job as the offensive coordinator. But the system is having Jaden Daniels. Like he is the offense. It is because of him that they are here. Like, could Mariota come in and have a nice little moment here or there, like he did? He tore up the damn Panthers, worst defense in NFL history. That's fine. I get it. Again, Cliff is doing a good job. But this team is Jaden Daniels. Like he is the reason that they are here.
I was going to say, yes, Cliff deserves some praise, and it's nice that he actually was able to change, but didn't he not start moving McLaurin around until like week 14? I mean, right? It was like, it took him a long time before he was still on the same side of the field, like 93% of the time until the final month, right? I mean, it still took him a long time.
I think actually this game against Philadelphia was a big reason why they really started moving him around, but it was in week 3, that Bengals game, that Terry McLaurin went up to Cliff Kingsbury during the game and said, let me take a rep from the right side because like I see this, that, and the other. And that's when he caught that game-winning touchdown. So that's definitely a credit to Cliff, though, is being able, like, listening to his players.
To it. Yeah, sure.
And by the way, man, Cliff, I mean, I know he's probably not getting a head coaching job in the cycle, and like, good on him. He doesn't want to take, I think he's said, I don't really want to take another head coaching job. 1, because he's still getting paid by the Cardinals. Right. And 2, why would you not want to just sit here with Jaden Daniels for a minute and continue to, like, I think he is really enjoying this job, and I don't blame him for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Impressive stuff, Daniels. And I'm beginning to think it didn't matter that he broke out later in age.
I think it might actually be a good thing. I think it might be a good thing that he came in
all that experience,
with all
right?
those reps.
I mean, Bo Nix, right? I mean, maybe that's a new thing, is actually you want quarterbacks more experience. I mean, Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson aren't on the other side, aren't exactly thriving.
Nope. In a league that's less patient than ever, it might be good to be able to come in here and hit the ground running, and having a catalog and seeing so many things and having so many reps. It really does matter for Daniels, but also, like, this guy's just different. Like he really is. In terms of him just being unnaturally cool, it's crazy. I mean, just shout out to Washington fans. Like, even if you lose this game, which I agree with Dalton, I do think the Commanders are live here. As I said, last week that they were live in that game. I did pick the Lions, and I regret that. But I mean, they were live in that game. They won that game. They could win this game. But even if you don't, man, you got so many good things to take away from this moment. And that's sort of where I want to change to the Eagles here, Dalton, for 2 reasons. Because this is, it's not total house money for the Washington Commanders, but it is a little bit, right? Like, I know this team is not going to think that. Like, Dan Quinn, these guys are not going to preach that in the locker room. Like, hey, this is house money. Nobody expected us to be here. Like, it doesn't matter if we win or lose. They want to win this game, and I think they can win this game. The difference is, I do think they'll be playing much looser than Philadelphia. Like, let's just say the Eagles fall behind in the first quarter, something like that. That's going to be a tight team. I think that's going to be a tight team. And I want to talk about on the offense here. Yeah, I know you mentioned Jalen Hurts and some of your skepticism here. I want to hear you kind of expand on that. Like, what do we think about this passing game? What we've seen in the playoffs, what we saw over the course of the regular season, and of course now with Hurts dealing with this injury.
Yeah, I mean, his Hurts over-under is 183.5 passing yards. I mean, it's just indicative to this offense of it's been really reliant on Saquon Barkley, and now he might be dealing with the sprained, knee. So he's playing compromised and not exactly the smoothest offense all year. The team's going to rely on Barkley more than ever with the banged up Hurts. That's just what I expect here. It's no secret. And Washington has been, slightly vulnerable to the run still. They've actually been crazy. Like, you look at the fantasy points, schedule adjusted fantasy points. Washington's been really, really solid against the pass and and wide receivers and stuff over the last month. I'm actually surprised this game's the same total as the Bills and Chiefs. I mean, I feel like They're going to be long possessions, no turnovers, punts you do want in an under. But just I feel like long possessions, a lot of running, and Hurts banged up. I don't see I see that game being lower scoring, whereas I think Bills and Chiefs could be, a classic Bills and Chiefs back and forth. So I expect the Eagles to be lower scoring, and I would actually say the under on the 183.5 passing yards. Hurts, who knows if he can play a whole full 4 quarters. I wish we had more clarity on exactly what injury he's dealing with.
Here's everything you need to know about like the state of the Eagles pass game versus the state of the Eagles run game and just everything like that. Again, this is from BetMGM. The over-under on passing yards for Jalen Hurts, as you mentioned, it's at 180.5 right now. The over-under on rushing yards for Saquon Barkley is 130.5.
Insane.
If
you never see that.
You never see that. You never see a running back's like rushing yards that high. By the way, if you want to take that, if you want to take the over on Saquon Barkley, which I'm going to talk about it here in a second. I don't hate, but it's plus 105. Like you could get plus odds on Barkley having a monster game here.
People are betting under actually. Interesting. I thought all the I guess it makes sense to sharp see that high.
Yeah, the under is minus 140.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, I might be the fish and just take the over. I mean, because here's the thing, man. Like, if they have to rely on Saquon Barkley purely on Saquon Barkley in this game, they actually have a bunch of matchup advantages. Usually, these are the exact same stats I read last week about the Commanders' run defense, but they apply here, just like they applied against Jahmyr Gibbs, who was ripping them for long runs last week. The Commanders' run defense, second most yards before contact allowed per rush. By the way, Barkley leads the NFL in yards before contact per rush among backs with 200 plus carries this year. Just such an incredible ecosystem. So there's a mismatch there. Mekhi Becton and the boys are balling up front. Seventh lowest stuff rate, most yards per carry allowed on gap scheme runs. The Commanders' run defense. Fifth most explosive rushing yards allowed on runs off the left and right end and up the C gap. Barkley, 41.6 according to Fantasy Points data. 41.6% of his yards have come on explosive runs. He is one of only 3 backs, Derrick Henry and the aforementioned Jahmyr Gibbs are the other 2, who have 200 plus carries and have an explosive rushing yard rate over 36%. So they're facing a guy, and in the second half, by the way, Barkley leads all running backs in the third and fourth quarter in explosive rushing yards. He's unbelievable at and he talked about this before. There was a story about this where he sets things up in the first quarter and then bangs them on big runs in the third quarter. He's just been able to call a lot of games, including last week and including against the Commanders in week 11 with these long runs in the second half. So even if they do just purely have to win this game on Saquon Barkley, that rushing ecosystem, I said ecosystem drink, and Saquon Barkley himself are good enough to win this game, I think, all on their own.
Yeah, it's crazy in the second half, and it's just seen Barkley get that many yards before contact, and then what he does with it, it's just such a crazy marriage. I mean, if Jalen Hurts wasn't stealing all those tush-push touchdowns, we would have just seen the most epic fantasy season of all time. A.J. Brown has 60 receiving yards since week 16, Harmon, total. I mean, wow. I mean, maybe he's due for a game here, but if all the signs point to the obvious game plan of just more Barkley, they're favored by 6 points. Second half, he'll probably break a long run, and it may be the sucker side, but at the same time, it's like maybe these lines can't be put high enough. We're in uncharted territory of what Barkley's doing, so. Should be a game that just features a ton of runs from Barkley, and then it's Barkley versus Jaden Daniels is what this is the simplest way of putting this matchup.
Here's the thing, though. If this Eagles passing game does come alive, they do have a lot of matchup advantages against this Commanders defense, because the Commanders defense, again, I respect the turnaround that they've had here, and they're not like a joke of a unit anymore. Those guys play really hard. They rush the passer pretty well. But from a coverage perspective, this is a very man coverage heavy team. The 6th most man coverage in the regular season. And through 2 postseason games here, they're 44.2% according to Fantasy Points data in man coverages, behind only the Ravens and the Rams in the postseason. And the Eagles rip up man coverage. A.J. Brown,
he's pretty good against man coverage. Yeah,
4.27 yards per route run against man coverage, and he's a He's a star against man coverage and reception perception basically every season. He's always like among the top 5 finishers. But from production, even this year in like a down season, 4.27 yards per route run against man coverage. Like among receivers to run over 250 plus routes. Tell me where you think the second place player in terms of yards per route run versus man coverage is.
3.2.
Yeah, 3.8. It's Puka Nacua. That's a huge gap.
That's still 6. Yeah.
It's still a pretty big gap there in terms of beating man coverage. And yeah, AJ Brown, like he could come alive. Look, if he catches that ball against the Rams last week, that he almost never drops those type of passes, we're having probably a little bit of a different conversation about the Eagles pass game. So I don't know. This can absolutely still be a big AJ Brown game.
Oh, that's a great point about the coverage. I didn't realize Washington was that man heavy. So absolutely something to note for Hayes. Definitely due, as I said, 60 total receiving yards since week 16.
57, this is again also crazy. 57.5 is the over under for AJ Brown. And still it's like only 180.5 for Jalen Hurts. It's just that's how much of a big burden he's got to carry in this passing game. I am willing to take the over. It's actually only minus 135. So you're giving up a little juice there, but I do think that AJ Brown can have a moment in this game. Like 60 plus yards for AJ Brown in this game. I can absolutely see it. But anything else you want to hit on before we toss to break and go AFC Championship game after this?
Nope. Should be a fun one. I'm rooting for Washington just because we haven't seen him, do this. I have a commander's friend. And it's been forever since they've been in this situation. So I'm rooting for Washington, but it should be a good game. And the Eagles are rightfully favored by 6 points.
And you're taking Commanders.
I'll take the points. I'll take the points. Yeah.
I think I'll lay the points. I'll go Eagles at -6. I just think overall roster quality, like Jaden Daniels is great. He's incredible. There's a lot of really good players in that Washington team, but I do think that 10-53 does favor the Eagles side here. Zach Bond flying around up front. He can definitely set the tone against Jaden Daniels on some of these scrambles. Those guys on the outside, like I don't want to say bad things about Mikey Sanders still because he's played really well. But again, if he locks up in man coverage against AJ Brown, I do think it's an advantage to AJ Brown there. And there's just so many guys on the defensive side that I think are going to tilt this game for Philadelphia. So I think they can win this game by a touchdown.
And a bunch of road games in a row for Washington. It might catch up to them. It is a difficult, stretch they're doing here. I hear you. The overall roster construction, I wouldn't be surprised if they covered this. The line sounds about right. I think maybe a teaser down to Eagles and then maybe the Bills up to 8 more. You tease that way. That would make some sense actually to me. The Eagles to win and you get 8 or so for the Bills on the other side. But should be a good game. Harmon, let's go. Jaden Daniels. What a special player.
Special player. No matter what happens on Sunday, he's absolutely a special player. Let's take another break. When we come back, we'll talk through the AFC Championship game and some more props right after this. All right, we're back. Let's talk AFC Championship game now. Buffalo Bills at Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this, right? Chiefs are -2, 47.5 point total. Like you said, Dalton, the exact same total in both these games. That is rather interesting. Man, it's funny, like preparing for this game and putting some stats on the outline and things like that. It's like, I almost want to toss all this stuff out, Dalton, right? Because anything could happen, right? Anything could happen between these two teams. And they're such different and interesting units once they get to the postseason. But let's talk about when the Bills have the ball here. What are we expecting when Josh Allen and the guys are on the field?
I'm not bringing up past for any gambling purposes, but this is just a fun stat. The last 10 head-to-head meetings between Bills and Chiefs, the record is 5-5 and 251 points to 251 points. They've scored the exact amount of points against each other these last 10 meetings. Should be a fun game. Josh Allen, my fireball guy, I'm totally rooting for him. But at the same time, I do have a preseason future on the Chiefs. I was hedging the Niners, of course. Expected a matchup there. But it's been a funny dynamic in my house because my wife absolutely despises the Chiefs just because, beating the Niners and whatnot. And I'm over here rooting for my Chiefs future. So that's been a funny argument in the last couple weekends. But Josh Allen is the man. He's their whole offense. The Chiefs are susceptible against the run, so James Cook will absolutely be involved. Shakira, you said, I don't want to steal your thunder here, the over-under, but the Chiefs are susceptible, very vulnerable to the slot. So Shakira is going to be involved here. But from a fantasy output, it's tough picking. I mean, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Cooper suddenly not running any routes. Where's Coleman been? And who scores the touchdowns there? So it's Josh Allen and against Patrick Mahomes. And get your popcorn ready. It's going to be super fun.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be so much fun to watch this game. Again, it's almost like, I think, a little silly to talk any matchups and things like that, just because like I said, anything can happen. Absolutely anything can happen, and it's going to be electric to watch. But let's talk about the Bills and their offense here, because, like you mentioned, Chiefs are top 2 in catches and yards allowed to slot receivers. I'm going to talk about Khalil Shakir a little bit later. It certainly seems like he should be the guy here, especially because you just look at the playing time of these guys. He is the only guy, Khalil Shakir, like wide receiver, tight end, running back, to run a route on more than 60% of the dropbacks in the postseason. Ty Johnson leads the running back section at 44% route participation. Amari Cooper is 5th among the wide receivers at 41.8%. He was actually asked in the locker room this week, kind of about the lack of opportunities. And he was just like, I do not care. He's like, I've played in the league and I've had it I've had it completely the other way, and I have nothing to show for it, from a Super Bowl perspective. I'm paraphrasing here. He's like, I have nothing to show for it. So like, why would I not want it the other way? Why would I complain about it? So, I mean, I believe him. I believe he feels that way. I do think it would be nice if they could get something out of Cooper here. 1.83 yards per route run against man coverage is second on the team for Amari Cooper here among the wide receivers. It would be nice if he could step up here, even if it's just like some contested passes on go routes, which is really the only way he's shined at all here. But yeah, it's just crazy that this is a full blown rotation on the entire offense for Buffalo.
Yeah, full blown. And then the Chiefs have dramatic splits on and off the field when Jalen Watson, and he returned last week. I'm not sure he's 100%, but he played a decent amount of snaps and was praised by the coaching staff. And then conversely, the Bills are quietly dealing with defensive injuries. Milano left with a hamstring injury. Rapp, the safety, looked injured. Christian Benford suffered a concussion on that onside kick.
Oh.
I mean, maybe he can do a quick turnaround like Ray Davis. Maybe these guys, those 3 all play, but those are 3 important defensive players that are battling injuries suffered recently. It's going to be as simple as the difference of that. Kansas City runs with a clean injury report, and a day longer rest too. They played Saturday, at home again. I mean, it's, and if I'm the Chiefs, the Bills are an awesome team, but if I'm the Chiefs, I'm like, I'm not exactly sad that Ravens team that had all the turnovers and outgained them by 150 yards and never came close to even punting once and still nearly went to overtime on the road is out. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a pretty dangerous. So sets up well for the Chiefs here to do their thing and win a close game late. It's Mahomes' magic, but I hope I'm wrong, and I hope it's the Bills' term, and I hope it's Allen, man, because he deserves a chance too.
I totally agree with everything you just said about I hope it's Josh Allen. I want to see one of these guys play in the Super Bowl. If it's the Chiefs, it's fine. It really makes no difference to me, but I would like to see it for Josh Allen. I would say though, Dalton, yeah, the injuries are an important point, and obviously the Chiefs are really healthy on their side, but otherwise I do think these two teams are maybe more even now than ever than when we typically see them in the postseason. I think the Chiefs are a little bit down, mostly because I think their pass defense is questionable. And we're kind of talking about that here, the man coverage and stuff like that. If you can get away from Trent McDuffie, and the Bills have so many different pass catchers, they're not like the Texans last week. It's like they got one guy. They have Nico Collins and a bunch of players you're not scared of. There are at least a lot of options here for Buffalo to go to. You want to throw to Ty Johnson out of the backfield. You want to get James Cook involved. That's an option. Curtis Samuel's an option against man coverage. They have more than like one answer. So there's that. But also because the Bills' offensive line is so good. And I think they have the offensive line advantage in this game. Per Next Gen Stats, Chris Jones was double teamed on 31.7% of his pass rushes in Week 11 against the Bills. Just one pressure across 13 pass rushes when double teamed. That's an interesting stat, and I think emblematic of just how good and how clean the Bills' offensive line is playing right now. Not just from a run game perspective, where they've obviously been super impressive, but you take a look at like Houston last week and just how bad their pass protection rules are, and so many unblocked pressures. They can't pick up a stunt to save their lives. The Bills are the inverse of that here, and I think that is a contrast from what we've seen with the Chiefs, where not only have the Bills played like more man coverage and they blitzed more on the other side, that Chiefs offensive line is it's a little bit better now that Tooney's playing left tackle, and I assume he's going to play there again after playing there last week. But that can still be an issue for Kansas City on that side.
The Bills have really shored up their run defense. too.
Yeah.
I mean, they were solid against Henry, but you look at the adjusted fantasy points allowed the last 3 games, their defense is bottom, 6th best against fantasy running backs. So I think Mahomes is just going to be, I mean, they can't they're not a great running team this year either, and Kareem Hunt and Pacheco. So I just think that's why I will talk about some Mahomes overs later, because I think it's going to be a lot of passing for Kansas City. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball at all. So I think it's going to be very much passing there, because that Bills defense has been underrated against the run over the second half of the year.
Great call. And, Patrick Mahomes, 25.5 rushing yards. I'll take the over on that. Because again, the Bills, they're sort of the inverse, where they've dialed up a lot more man coverage in the postseason.
I was going to bring that up. Yes, 100%, 125.5. The only reason I left that on my honorable mention one is because kneel downs could cost him 15 yards. I mean, do you see how far that guy goes on his kneel downs? I mean, I know it happens all the time to bettors, but if I project them to win, I could see him seriously losing like 15 yards on the final 3 kneel downs. But absolutely, Mahomes is what the best stat I heard of, like, when I'm trying to explain why Mahomes is quote unquote clutch or why he wins these close games, was his scramble rate goes up like times 10 or something in the fourth quarter of playoff games, or the second half of playoff games. So it's like, oh, okay, that's why it's just impossible to stop, because he does fundamentally plays different, and it's just impossible to get 4 downs and them off the field.
Great analysis on the playoff scramble rates and things like that. I think that have you seen how many yards he loses on kneel downs? Might be the most sicko comment we've ever seen on the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It's one of them.
Dude, it's not just 1 yard. He goes out of his way to lose time, and he takes like 6-yard losses on these. It's the real thing.
I just want to note from the Chiefs passing game, they're very similar to the Bills a little bit here. Xavier Worthy has run a route on 87.5% of the dropbacks last week. Travis Kelce, 78.1%. Marquise Brown, 71.9%. Those are the Chiefs' leaders in terms of route participation. Everybody else was sub 47%. DeAndre Hopkins, forget about it. Pure rotation. Juju, obviously rotation. So last week we saw the Eagles. Andy Reid and the boys just completely avoid the outside corners for Houston. Christian Benford, especially if he doesn't play in this game, I would imagine they're attacking those guys on that side. I know you're going to talk about Xavier Worthy in the prop section here, but even Marquise Brown, who was catchless last week, and I kind of liked him in that matchup because I thought they might move him into the slot more. Didn't really happen as much, although he did play a decent bit of slot. 35.5 is the over-under for him. 3.5 catches. I could see him being much more involved this week.
A couple things here. Worthy, can you tell me where they've been playing as far as slot alignment lately? Because the Bills have been just crazy tough against the slot over the last month. I believe Worthy's been about 30% this season. But yeah, I like him. His over-under's just 48.5 receiving yards this week. I mean, he averaged 10.3 targets the final 3 games of the regular season. And I mean, he could get that in 1 catch here. So who is playing the slot with Hollywood back?
Yeah, so again, last week talked the route participation, things like that. Xavier Worthy was in the slot on 60% of his snaps last week.
Okay, interesting. All right, well maybe that is interesting actually, because the Bills have been tough against it. Okay, all right.
And by the way, would you like to guess his air yards per target last week, Xavier Worthy?
What is it a lot? No, it's slots. It's low. I don't know. No, I don't know.
1.5.
2.
1.5.
Okay.
And
wow.
Marquise Brown, 29.5. Again, that's crazy. The inverse. Marquise Brown definitely, since he's been back, that has allowed them to be a little bit more gadgety with Xavier Worthy, which I think works for him. I don't think you want him running a lot of although I'll give him a credit. He did have that one kind of tougher catch that he made early on in the contest against the Texans last week. But still, you kind of, I mean, they're peppering him with targets. Target on 21.4% of his routes. Other wide receivers, nobody was above 9%. So no question, he has definitely been super involved of late.
Yeah, interesting. He's going to be an interesting player to target in fantasy leagues next year. He really just was way more active down the stretch. The Chiefs have the ball. Harmon, there have been 280 turnovers in the NFL since Week 12, and the Chiefs have committed none of them.
Wow.
0 turnovers since Week 12, 8 straight games without a TO, longest streak by any team in the Super Bowl era. The Bills have just 8 turnovers their last 19 games, though, by the way. So, these teams protect the football. I think teams are undefeated in the playoffs when winning the turnover battle. And then we've heard this stat, too. KC has won 16 straight one-score games. Wild stuff. But Yeah, man, this should be really good, and I think Worthy's the guy you still want with that. If you're playing DFS or something this week, he has emerged as their main receiver. But then, of course, Kelsey. It's narrative, but the playoffs turn, and he seems to be more involved, and maybe you expect more of the same this weekend.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. He is definitely. He cranks it up in the playoffs, one way or another. There's no question. You mentioned the turnovers for Kansas City. You mentioned the turnovers for Buffalo. Josh Allen, it just in terms of taking sacks, it's insane just the difference that this guy is at this point. He had like a sub 3% sack rate in the regular season, and he's been sacked 3 times in the playoffs, twice against Denver and then once against Baltimore. Meanwhile, the Bills are also like 50+% success rate against 2 of the best run defenses. This is a very even game. So with that, Dalton, who are we picking?
It's insane, Allen. 14 sacks, 6 interceptions this season. I mean, it's crazy. How
imagine if I told you that after his rookie, or even his second season, man.
I know it's totally crazy. All right, we'll go 24-21 Chiefs. I almost feel more comfortable taking the money line too because they keep these games so close. But I'm just whatever. It's boring. It's the Chiefs. Better rested at home. Mahomes is magic at the end of these games. I mean, it's whatever. It is what it is. But I would. My heart says Allen. My brain and my wallet also is hoping for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I can't. It just seems silly to not take Patrick Mahomes. Even at just -2 at home. You know what I'm saying? Like it just seems crazy not to do that. That being said, I'm with you that my heart also wants to see the Bills win this game. I'm not going to be pissed if it's Kansas City. I like watching Patrick Mahomes. I like watching the Chiefs. I will not be upset one bit if they're in the Super Bowl again. I just would like to see something different. I'd like to see Josh Allen, like I said, get a Super Bowl. I just can't help thinking, though, that this is the best Bills team that we've seen. Like the most complete, well-rounded. Like obviously they don't have Stephon Diggs. They don't have a number 1 receiver. They lost a lot of guys over the last few years that used to, like this offseason, that used to be big-time contributors for this team. But I think it's the best Bills offensive line. I think it's the most well-rounded offense. And I think Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich have done a really good job with this defense this year. So if Buffalo ends up winning this game, I will not be surprised just because I do think this is such a well-rounded Bills team. I think, like I said, this is the most even the Chiefs and Bills have been, where I think these two teams are just neck and neck. It's just, like you said, one team's at home. One team is on a little extra rest and is a little bit healthier, which is why I will go Chiefs -2. But man, I think this one's going to be close, and I think it's going to be competitive, and it probably will come down to, Pat Mahomes and the final drive and getting a damn field goal there.
Yeah, it should be super close. Allen's Amanda, they do run the football pretty good too. This Bills team is absolutely legit. But it also would be cool to see, the first three-peat ever. But yeah, my heart rooting for Allen. Brain picking Chiefs.
Yeah, I said I'm not sure. I don't have kids. I'm not sure if I want to have kids.
Heard that, yeah.
But yeah, I would basically have to be like, well, son, who might not even exist, future son, daughter. I saw the first three-peat. Isn't that cool? That's what you have to say if you want the Chiefs to win this game. But again, I don't know if any of that applies to me because I don't have children. Not sure if I want to have children. I would like to see Josh Allen win a Super Bowl. That is something I could definitely say. And shoot, I mean, even if Jaden Daniels wins the Super Bowl, that would be pretty sick. Bills-Eagles would also be a great matchup as well, but I do ultimately think the Chiefs win this game. Alas, that is what's going to happen. All right, final segment here. Welcome to Prop It Up. Again, NFC Championship, AFC Championship edition here of Prop It Up. Dalton and I have 4 props. We talked about these a little bit earlier in the show. We might have teased them, but now we're going to highlight the 4 prop bets that we like the best. Little player prop action here for Championship Sunday. You should consider throwing these in parlays, bet them straight, whatever. Have a good time. Dalton, give me your 2 props to highlight for Championship weekend.
Patrick Mahomes over 254.5 passing yards. Bills have shut down the run. They have injuries on defense. I think the volume will be there in this matchup. They're going to have to throw. Bills offense is going to put up points. He's Mahomes. I do like the Mahomes if you like over rushing yards 25.5. As I mentioned, though, be concerned that kneel downs could cost him a good 15 yards at the end of that game. But he does run more, and he'll be forced to run more, and I think that that's in play as well. But give me Mahomes over 254.5 passing yards is my first one.
I'll go with my first one here. Khalil Shakir over 5.5 catches at plus 120 is where it was at BetMGM. Khalil Shakir, like I mentioned earlier, he is run a route on over 70% of the dropbacks. He's the only receiver over 60%. Wide receiver, tight end, running back, doesn't matter. He has been super involved over the course of the postseason. I think he gets 6 catches in this game. He actually was much more productive last week. I thought he would go under his receiving yardage, but he got that one long play early, blew that apart. And he's just been so consistent and reliable for Josh Allen. He's also a guy that I think could beat man coverage, especially on these like slant routes and quick in breakers. And the Chiefs do play well in the regular season. They played a lot of man coverage. They played a lot more zone coverage last week against the Houston Texans, which is interesting because Khalil Shakir is actually super productive against zone coverage. 70% of their snaps last week against Houston, according to Fantasy Points data, they use zone coverage, which would be good for Shakir either way. So Dalton, give me your next prop here.
Over the last 5 weeks, the Chiefs have allowed the most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to the slot. So I like that, Harmon, for Shakir. Speaking of the slot, I don't love it if Worthy plays 60% of the snaps there again this week, but that's not typically his thing, and they'll manufacture looks for him. But give me Worthy over 48.5 receiving yards. He averaged 63 receiving yards the last 3 games. The final 3 games of the regular season, 10.3 targets. He also was getting 2.7 rushes over that span, 11 opportunities in the red zone. Andy Reid is manufacturing this guy touches. Worthy was among the league leaders in uncatchable air yards percentage. I just wrote a column of Numbers Do Lie and featured a couple videos of just the comedy of the inability of Mahomes and him to connect. They only need to connect on one of these to get 48 yards. No matter how low his ADOT was last week, I could expect it to be higher this week. And this is just coming down to fundamentally a volume thing. I think the Chiefs are going to struggle running. The Bills are going to put up points. This is going to be higher scoring. And as I have correlate with my Mahomes over, I think he's going to be passing. And you could do Kelsey if you want and play the narrative. No problem here. I looked into it. I just think that 68.5 receiving yards, the number seems about right. Whereas Worthy, he can get to 50 in a game with all this passing. So give me Worthy, who's the Chiefs' number 1 receiver right now.
Yeah, all the passing, I agree with you. This should be a big time passing game for the Kansas City Chiefs, at least, given the fact that we do not have a consistent run game there. So I like the Xavier Worthy bet, especially as Dalton mentioned earlier, if Christian Benford is not going to be playing in this game or is a little banged up. Certainly something to watch there. Last one for me, Jalen Hurts under 7.5 rush attempts, minus 105. I just can't see this being a big rushing game for Jalen Hurts. Number one, because Washington actually has some pretty disciplined players who are good against quarterback-designed run games. Now, I can absolutely get banged on this one if we get some tush pushes. There's no question. I might be just straight up giving him 2 rush attempts with a couple of tush pushes in the game. So that is certainly dangerous. But otherwise, I don't see him keeping it on option plays with the injury. I think if Jalen Hurts is going to impact this game, it is going to be through the passing game. So I don't see Jalen Hurts getting too much scramble action in this one. 7.5 rush attempts here, Dalton. I will take the under, but the tush push action does make me a little nervous on that.
But they didn't even use the tush push after his injury last week, right? I don't know. He might be compromised. I think that's a risk. Even if he enters feeling, I think it's a risk if they use him that way too much this week. Yes, I think that I'm with you on this one. And for what it's worth, I know this isn't perfectly correlated with rushing attempts, but over the same last 5 weeks, schedule adjusted fantasy points. Do you know Washington has allowed the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks over that span? I mean, they're tightening up in that area. So I'm with you here with an injured Hurts under on the rushing attempts.
Yep, I think that is just the way to go. I mean, look, they will probably risk the tush push even if he's not healthy. Then again, you don't want Kenny Pickett or Tanner McKee playing in the damn Super Bowl if you move on, but still it is the playoffs. So that makes me a little nervous, but I do think he goes under 7.5 rush attempts. And that, Dalton Del Don, is going to do it for us today. Appreciate you, man. We covered a ton of ground here and really looking forward to both these games this weekend.
I appreciate you, Harmon. It's good to be back, man. Good talking ball.
Absolutely. And Dalton will be back with us at some point very shortly. But for now, that is going to do it for this show. Shout out to everybody who listened. Hey, I haven't asked lately, but if you like the show, subscribe, maybe leave a rating or review. We'll comment on YouTube. Tell us why you like the show. If you don't like the show, you don't have to tell us anything. You can come on Twitter and specifically tell me why you hate the show at Matt Harmon _BYB. You can tell me why you hate the show, but if you love the show, leave a review where you watch this, listen to it, whatever. Leave a comment. Do all that fun stuff. Would appreciate it, and it would mean a lot to me. And it would mean a lot to poor producer Colin, who is being censored on the Cowboys head coaching situation right now. With that, that's going to do it for today's show. On Monday, Andy Behrens is back with me to recap all the action from conference championship game weekend. Until then, we are out.